You know, whenever the conversation turns to plant-forward diets or even just, I don't know, dialing back on red meat, there's always that one lingering anxiety, the cow in the room, if you
The
will.
classic protein panic.
The fear that if I put down the steak, I'm going to wither away because I can't possibly get enough protein from a plant. We have this deep-seated cultural equation where protein equals meat and everything else is just garnish.
It's a really persistent myth, but if you look at the nutritional science from, say, the last 5 years, that binary view has been pretty thoroughly dismantled.
So for this deep dive, we're moving past the basic eat your beans advice. We've pulled a stack of medical reviews, some really dense proteomic analysis papers, and the latest data on bioavailability. The mission today is to get a bit more sophisticated about this.
Right.
We aren't just looking at quantity, we're looking at quality, the food matrix, and the actual biochemistry of how plants build muscle.
Which is where all the nuance is.
Yeah.
Gram for gram, the story is just a lot more complex than looking at the back of a package.
Right. And in going through the data, I found some things that actually challenge my own assumptions. We've got a seed that mathematically beats beef in density, and a vegetable that has a technically perfect protein score despite having almost no volume.
That paradox is one of my absolute favorite bits of nutritional trivia.
So let's get right into the numbers. If I'm a listener who is used to the density of animal products, you know, where you eat a small amount and get a massive protein hit, where do I even look in the plant kingdom? Because a salad isn't going to cut it.
No, if you are chasing pure density, you have to look at what I call the heavy hitters. And if we're ranking them strictly by the numbers, the top contender is Seitan.
Wheat meat.
Exactly. It's made by washing the starch away from wheat flour until you're left with just pure gluten. Because essentially in isolate, the numbers are staggering. You're looking at 25 to nearly 36 grams of protein per 100 grams.
Which puts it toe-to-toe with a ribeye steak.
It does. It essentially is a steak, just made of wheat protein. Now, obviously, if you're celiac or gluten sensitive, this is kryptonite.
Right.
But metabolically, for everyone else, it is a powerhouse.
I think most people know Seitan is the dense option, but I was surprised to see where seeds landed in this analysis. I usually just think of seeds as a sprinkle, not a main event.
And that's the mistake most people make. In the comprehensive analysis we reviewed, the apex of natural plant protein density wasn't a legume at all. It was pumpkin seeds. Pepitas.
I knew they were high in magnesium. I think they're usually cited as the best source for that, but I had no idea they competed on protein count.
Oh, they dominate. The kernels clock in at around 32 grams of protein per 100 grams. That is an incredible amount of amino acids packed into a very small, lipid-dense matrix.
And since you mentioned the magnesium, that's not a small detail for anyone interested in fitness.
It's crucial. Magnesium is a cofactor for ATP production. You need it to generate energy for proper muscle contraction. So with pumpkin seeds, you're getting the building blocks for the muscle and the fuel system to run it.
Hemp seeds were right behind them in the data too, sitting at about 31 grams.
Yeah, hemp is interesting because it's also very high in fat, but we can get to the fat profiles later. The main point is, if you're looking for pure density, seeds beat beans.
Which just feels counterintuitive because we always hear beans and rice, beans and rice.
Well, legumes, lentils, black beans, chickpeas, they are the old reliables. They aren't as dense as seeds, you're right. Lentils are around 18 grams per cooked cup, black beans maybe 15, but you can eat a lot more of them.
That's her point.
I mean, eating a cup of pumpkin seeds is a chore. Eating a cup of lentil soup is lunch.
Okay, fair point on volume.
Okay.
But we can't talk about plant protein without addressing the heavyweight champion of the clinical world, and that's soy.
Soy is really in a category of its own. Tofu, tempeh, edamame. In almost every nutritional metric, soy behaves more like an animal protein than a plant protein.
And that segues us perfectly into the next layer of this deep dive. It's not just about the grams. I mean, you can eat 100 grams of leather, and it's technically protein, but it won't do you any good. We need to talk about bioavailability and quality.
This is where the science has really evolved. For a long time, we relied on a score called PDCAAS.
The protein digestibility corrected amino acid score. Quite a mouthful.
Right, and it was the standard. But now we're shifting toward a more precise metric called DAS, the digestible indispensable amino acid score.
Okay, break that down for us. Why does that switch matter?
It matters because of where we measure. PDCAAS looks at the entire digestive tract. It measures what goes in versus what comes out in the feces. The problem is, your colon is full of bacteria that also eat protein.
So the bacteria are stealing the data.
In a way, yeah. The bacteria might consume amino acids that you didn't actually absorb. making the food look more digestible than it really is.
Mm-hmm.
DAS measures absorption at the end of the small intestine, the ileum, before the food hits that colon microbiome.
So DDAS tells us what I actually got, not what my gut bacteria had for lunch.
Precisely. It's a much stricter, more accurate standard. And when you use that standard, the hierarchy shifts a little bit.
The animal sources, eggs, dairy, they're usually the reference point here, right? The gold standard.
An egg is essentially perfect. A PDCAAS of 1.0. Its amino acid profile matches human requirements almost exactly. Greek yogurt is similar. The straining process concentrates the casein, which is highly bioavailable.
So using these stricter standards, does any plant actually hit that perfect score?
No.
Soy.
Still soy.
Still soy. It is the only major plant protein that consistently hits a PDCA of 1.0, and it scores very, very highly on DIAS. That's why you see soy protein isolate in medical nutrition, in infant formula. It's not just cheap, it's chemically complete.
Now, I have to challenge you on the potato paradox we teased at the top.
Right.
Because I looked at the data, and sure, the quality score is high, but potatoes are mostly starch. I mean, I'm not going to eat 5 pounds of potatoes to hit my macros.
And please don't try. But the paradox is fascinating from a biological perspective. You're right, the quantity is low, about 2.5 grams per 100 grams, but the quality of that tiny amount of protein is exceptional.
It has a PDCAAS of 0.99, right? Almost perfect. It does. It is arguably the most balanced plant protein in existence.
Yeah.
If you were in a famine and could only eat one food, potatoes would keep you alive longer than almost anything else, just because that small amount of protein covers all your essential amino acid needs.
So it's quality over quantity in the most extreme sense.
It really challenges the notion that low protein equals bad protein. It's not. It's just dilute protein.
But most plants aren't like soy or potatoes. I mean, the biggest knock against vegetarian diets has always been the incomplete protein argument. We know we need the 9 essential amino acids. How much do we actually need to stress about missing one?
Much less than you think. This is where the concept of synergies comes in. The old idea that you had to combine foods in the exact same meal, like I must eat the rice and the bean in the same spoonful, that have been completely debunked.
So the body is smarter than that.
The body maintains an amino acid pool. It circulates free amino acids in the blood and liver. So as long as you get the complementary sources within, say, a 24-hour window, your body can pull what it needs from the pool to synthesize tissue.
But the combinations themselves are still valid, right? The grain plus legume formula.
Oh, the biochemistry there is beautiful. Grains like wheat, rice, oats are generally low in an amino acid called lysine, but they're high in methionine. Legumes, beans, lentils, peanuts are the mirror image. High lysine, low methionine.
So peanut butter on whole wheat toast isn't just a comfort food, it's a biochemical handshake.
It's a complete protein structure. Same thing with hummus and pita. You see that these cultural staples often evolve around these perfect biological synergies.
Are there any plants that just break the rule, that are complete on their own besides soy?
Yeah, there's a small club of naturally complete plants. Quinoa is the famous one. It's technically a pseudo-cereal, not a grass, but it has all 9 essentials. Buckwheat is another.
Which is great for soba noodle fans.
And soba has that distinct nutty flavor because of that protein structure. Then you have things like chia seeds and spirulina.
Spirulina is that blue-green algae.
Right. It's incredibly dense and complete, but practically speaking, you're only eating a teaspoon of it. It's more of a supplement, not a meal.
This brings us to a really crucial point the research highlighted. When we eat meat, we are largely just eating the muscle. But when we eat plants, we are consuming a food matrix. We're getting a whole package deal.
This is the secondary health implication. You aren't just importing nitrogen for your muscles, you're importing this complex structure that interacts with your gut, your immune system, everything.
So let's break down that package. What are the key components of this matrix?
The first and most obvious is fiber. Animal protein has 0 fiber. It's biologically impossible. But if you get your protein from, say, lentils or flax, you are getting a massive dose of fiber.
The notes mention flax specifically for its mucilage content. What's that about?
Flax is a fiber heavyweight. That mucilage forms a gel in the stomach, which slows down gastric emptying. That means better blood sugar regulation, and you feel full longer. You just don't get that metabolic braking effect from a chicken breast.
Then you have the anti-inflammatory squad.
Right. And this is where the colors come in. Black beans are rich in anthocyanins. Those are the same compounds you find in blueberries. Spirulina has phycocyanin. These act as antioxidants.
So while you're building muscle, you're also reducing oxidative stress.
It's a multitasker. And we should probably group the healthy fats in here too. Hemp seeds offer that optimal 3-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. Pistachios contain lutein, which is essential for eye health. You're feeding multiple systems at once.
However, every system has a flaw. The plant matrix does have a gaping hole, and that is vitamin B12.
It's the one nutrient you really cannot reliably get from plants. It's bacterial in origin, and our sanitized food supply pretty much removes it.
Which brings us to a food with a terrible name but a serious cult following, nooch.
Nutritional yeast.
It sounds like an industrial byproduct, but the data suggests it's a legitimate hack.
It is. It's a deactivated yeast, so it won't ferment anything. It has this cheesy umami flavor. But the reason it's so iconic in these circles is that it's usually fortified with B12. Plus, a quarter cup has 8 grams of protein. It's basically a protein powder you can sprinkle on popcorn.
Okay, before we leave the weird food category, we have to talk about the fungus among us. Mycoprotein, corn.
Mycoprotein is fascinating because it's neither plant nor animal. It's derived from Fusarium venenatum, which is a microfungus.
Which sounds delicious.
It tastes better than it sounds.
Yeah.
But structurally, it's unique. It has these branching fibers that mimic the texture of meat muscle better than almost any plant isolate can.
So it's not just a mushy patty.
No, it has bite. And nutritionally, it's high in fiber, low in sodium, and it's a complete protein. It's a prime example of using fermentation to create high-quality protein really efficiently.
Okay, let's pivot to the gym floor. We have a lot of listeners who might be lifting heavy or training for endurance. The common critique is that plant protein just doesn't build muscle as well as whey or beef. Is there any truth to that?
There is nuance. It all comes down to a specific mechanism called the leucine trigger.
Leucine being one of those essential amino acids.
It's the most important one for hypertrophy, for muscle growth. Leucine activates a pathway called MTO, mammalian target of rapamycin. Think of MTO as the master light switch for muscle protein synthesis.
So you need to flip the switch to start building.
And the switch has a resistance threshold. You need about 2 to 3 grams of leucine circulating in your blood to flip it on.
And I'm guessing whey hits that number pretty easily?
Whey is incredibly leucine dense. You can hit that trigger with a standard 25-gram scoop of whey protein. No problem.
And plants.
Most plants have a lower leucine content per gram. So if you eat 25 grams of soy protein, you might only get 1.5 grams of leucine. You haven't quite flipped the switch.
So the engine doesn't start?
Engine idles.
Yeah.
But the fix is simple. It's just math. You just need more volume.
So instead of 25 grams, I take 35 or 40.
Exactly. If you bump that soy intake up to 35 or 40 grams, you hit the leucine threshold, the mTOR pathway activates, and the muscle building result is statistically indistinguishable from whey.
So it's not that plants can't do it, it's just that the dosage is different.
It's a volume game. If you're an elite athlete, you just need to be aware that your protein allowance needs to be slightly higher to get the same anabolic signal.
That seems like a pretty manageable trade-off.
Especially when you consider the anti-inflammatory benefits we just talked about. You might recover faster, even if you have to eat a little bit more to build.
Let's pull all this together. We've covered a lot of ground, from gluten steaks to fungal fibers. If we had to create a cheat sheet for the listener standing in the grocery store aisle, how do we categorize this?
I'd break it down by goal. If you want density maximum protein in minimum space, you want seeds, pumpkin and hemp.
If you want quality chemical perfection, you want soy.
Yeah.
So tofu, tempeh, edamame.
Yep. If you want longevity and gut health, you prioritize legumes, lentils and beans for all that fiber and antioxidants.
And for the snackers,
nuts and Greek yogurt are great there.
I want to zoom out for a second before we wrap up. We've focused heavily on personal physiology, mTOR, gut health, absorption. But the sources we reviewed touch on a much broader context. This protein transition isn't just happening because people want to run faster 5Ks.
No, it's a global logistical necessity. We are looking at a population heading toward 10 billion people.
And the math of animal protein just doesn't scale to that number.
It's an efficiency problem. Converting plant calories into animal calories is just inherently inefficient. You lose so much energy at every step of the trophic level. It takes a massive amount of land, water, and feed to produce one steak.
Whereas lentils?
Lentils are metabolic magic. They fix their own nitrogen in the soil. They require a fraction of the water. When you look at the economics of feeding a crowded planet, pulses and legumes are the most cost-effective, high-quality fuel available, period.
So when we talk about swapping beef for beans, or maybe trying corn, it's not just a personal health hack, it's participating in a necessary shift in the global food system.
It's about aligning your personal biology with the planet's biology. And the good news is, as we've seen today, you don't have to sacrifice nutritional quality to do it.
You just have to eat a few more pumpkin seeds.
Maybe check your leucine math.
I'm going to go sprinkle some pepitas on my dinner. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.